That's it. Hello, my name is Kaz Kasozi and we are back in the box. This is the second video about compression in Studio One, and if you haven't seen the first part, first check that out. Make sure that at least you've seen part one before you go on to see this, because certain things are continuing on from the same ideas that I was talking about in the first part. Firstly, let's consider these two backing vocals here. They only come in briefly at the middle section. Let's have a listen to them in isolation here.
As a man thinks it is hard, so shall it be. I confess it in my heart that I'm yours.
Okay, pretty simple. I don't want to hassle compressing each separately, but I could. However, I don't believe it's quite necessary. The reason I'm actually applying compression is not so much to control their level, but to make them gel and sound more as one. First of all, I'm going to make sure that the two, select both the tracks, and then make sure that those two are going to the same bus. So I right click here and I say add bus for selected channels. So that means that a new bus channel is created here, which is receiving these two tracks. Bus one, I'm going to rename BVs or something like that. And you see here that they're output into BV, so they go to this track and then this is sent to the main. So now it's on this track that I'm going to apply a compressor. And I want to compress this to gel together. Again, I'm going to start from a preset. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't feel pressured that you haven't made your own setup. Basically, use the presets as a starting point. The problem only arises when people use presets simply as they are and then just smack them on. But if you get it and then start to tweak it to fit your material, then that is when you're really using them correctly. Okay, let's hear what this sounds like.
As a man thinks it is hard, so shall it be. I confess it in my heart that I'm yours.
So I want a lot of it to be compressed.
I want to take you with me forever, girl. I want to wake up in the morning with you every day.
You see, when I did that, you can even hear some of the music that was leaking, possibly through the headphones. Gonna run it again.
As a man thinks it is hard, so shall it be. I confess it in my heart that I'm yours. I want to take you with me forever, girl. I want to wake up in the morning with you every day.
As far as makeup gain is concerned, it's automatic at the moment and it's doing the job quite well for me, I think. So I'm not going to tickle it. I'm just going to make the release later. I want it to stay very compressed. I want this to be almost artificial in a sense. I'm not really looking for to hear real singers. And indeed, in the final mix of the song, if you hear it, a link will be provided. If you hear it with these voices, I didn't really bother to try to make them so audible as such. They're there as a character to enhance the lead vocal.
As a man thinks it is hard, so shall it be. I confess it in my heart that I'm yours.
So if I throw a little bit of reverb on that here, I think it will be tasty.
As a man thinks it is hard, so shall it be. I confess it in my heart that I'm yours.
Let's hear it in context. I applied this compression to streamline them and make them sit more in the mix as an instrument themselves. And in doing so, I also needed the compression not to be noticeable because I don't want the voices to call attention to themselves. So even though the compression is quite heavy, I don't want that element to be noticeable. And this means I can use this element of the knee. What it does is soften the entrance of the compressor onto the signal, as in this is a hard knee. You can see the angle there. this part here, it means that at the point that I've set the threshold is exactly where the compressor will start to act. So anything below it, it won't act upon it at all. But if I soften the knee by raising this, it means that yes, there's a point where the compressor really starts to do its work. However, by softening that point, I'm providing a softer curve. I'm providing a range of values around which the compressor can start to act, as opposed to providing one single value of threshold at which point it can start. And that kind of gives a curve that gives a softer feeling to the compression. And this is quite desirable on things like vocals, and sometimes on some basses or bass lines when you want to round them off, and on instruments which you want to soften a start point. You may not necessarily want this on a piece of music that has a lot of like staccato things going on. This may not be something that you want. However, you may want it because you want the compressor to ease in as opposed to it revealing its presence. So that's what the knee is for. So you can see the farther I push it, the smoother that curve is. And basically the smoother the way that effect comes in and out, as you can see there. So I put it the other way, a hard knee compressor, then the other way, soft knee compressor. It's worth noting that not all compressors have this control on them, and the lack of it on a compressor doesn't necessarily make it a bad compressor, because inherently it may already be of a certain type, that this compressor is a hard knee compressor, or that this compressor is a soft knee compressor, finished. So there's some that come already prescribed to be one thing or the other. And then others may have a dial like this that allows you to change between a series of values, and others may have like maybe 3 options. Like one is like hard knee, and then medium, and then soft knee, or just the 2 options, hard and soft. Okay, so on this one I had it like relatively soft because I want it to smooth in a little bit. Okay, let's have a listen to that together with the lead vocal.
As a man thinks in his heart, so shall it be. I confess it in my heart that I'm yours, yeah. I wanna take you with me forever, girl. Yes, I do. I wanna wake up in the morning with you every day, drinking coffee at last.
So you get the idea that sometimes you'll use the compression to kind of like really get certain sounds to gel and sit in, almost to the point of being not necessarily lost, but being so intrinsic to a sound. So the backing vocals now are sitting in so well, and we're not really hearing them as backing vocals. They're just another musical element that is making the music sweeter without over revealing themselves. The effect of a knee, either being hard or soft, can be quite subtle, but that doesn't make it any less useful. Okay, moving on, we want to consider this area here. I'm going to go backwards. We didn't look at maybe compressing something like a snare. I already had a bit of compressor here that was applied to the snare drum. Drums are a bit unique because they have very immediate hard attack. Like the transient they hit is very immediate, and then they have a short decay, so the sound dies quite quickly with a lot of drums. Not all drums, but the snare certainly doesn't decay very long. The fact that they're very immediate sounds, then they kind of act differently, or they make the compressor act quite differently. Let's have a listen to it without the compressor being engaged. Okay, it's a pretty straightforward sound, nothing fancy there, but I want it to be a little bit punchier than that. So what I'm going to do, like with the compressor on, I'm going to compress it around at a ratio of around 4:1 to start off. So listen to it before I even do anything with the attack and release. So we're getting some gain reduction there. I'm going to bring in the attack to be a bit earlier. And you can see as it gets earlier, the drum gets, as it gets earlier, we have a weaker transient. I'm basically killing the vibrance of the snare, but so I need it to act, but not too soon, so that we keep our transients. And then with the release, you also don't want that too early, because if it's too early, it kind of leaves this airy sound afterwards. It's too long, a snare. I want it to be snappy and short. That's like snappier. So let's hear that in context with the rest of the drum kit. Yeah, that's quite cool there. And if you're dealing with drums now, the way you would deal with a single drum like a snare is not exactly how you would deal with, say, overheads. So I have where are overheads? I have overheads here. Let me call up again this compressor here. So again, I can start with the preset. It's not a problem, and then tweak to suit my needs. So let's have a listen to it. So as this plays here, you can see that it's already compressing where the hard hits are, the kicks and snares and stuff like that. But what it's also doing is making the cymbals a little bit dead. It's removing the life. So I don't want it to grab too much of those initial attacks too much. And I'm gonna have it release a little bit late. So let's hear it in context with the rest of the drum kit. Now, dealing with this overhead is really not easy because it was heavily compressed on the way in when it was being recorded, which brought up a lot of the other drums as well. They have a lot of high frequencies with the cymbals, and they also have low frequencies with the kick and some of the tones. However, I may want the compressor to act more upon the cymbals, which are the main thing that is happening within the overhead microphones. Perhaps I don't want it to be triggered by the kick drums and stuff like that. So by activating this filter, I would be telling it that whatever frequency is here is going to be a cutoff point, and anything below it will not trigger the compressor. Watch what it does when I change this level here. So it's acting right now, especially against the kick and snare. But if I take this up, you can see the compressor is not acting at all. Yeah, because anything below this frequency is not being acted upon. Yeah, but I can bring it back to, you know, around maybe 200 or something like that. So these two are filters that allow you to choose. If you have a sound like this, which has, you know, various frequencies going on, even a drum loop or something like that, then it might be wise to choose some things to be filtered out before they get into the compressor. Another use for it would be perhaps when you're compressing a bass that has also a lot of high things going on, but you don't want the lower parts of the bass to over-trigger the compressor, especially because there's a lot of energy within the low notes, and sometimes they can end up and sometimes they can end up triggering the compressor unnecessarily, meaning you may end up having some overtones or harmonics which are undesirable. That's a topic for a whole other tutorial, but you understand at least what these can do. And the other one, the other side, basically filters the high frequencies. Let's check out another way to use this feature. There's a drum loop on this channel. Let's have a listen to that. So that is already like tight and compact, and it's got some kind of reverb on it of some sort as well. And I want to make it just a little bit more tight so that it sits really well within the drum kit, so that we're not hearing like two different patterns. For this production, I didn't want to hear like a drum loop as well as a drum kit. I just wanted to hear one whole sound of drums. So I want to get this a little bit tighter, and compression will help me get there. Similar compressor, and this time I go for a back bit. Play and have a listen to how the preset stands just as it is. And as we can see here, there's no gain reduction whatsoever. So actually no compression is going on. Now, this is what I was explaining before, that you can't just throw a preset on and think that then it will just start to do some compression for you, because if the threshold is not right, according to the signal that you've got, you may not actually get any compression whatsoever. So actually, this needs to be much lower to even start to have any kind of effect. So I'm going to play again and then start to play around with these settings to get an effect. Yeah, and right now it's compressing a lot of the kick, but the snare is remaining quite intact. But I don't want like too much compression on the kick, and this is where this section here can come in and be useful, where if I click this for filter on, that means I can allow the low frequencies to be filtered out, so the kick is not going to be bothering the compressor. Like if I play now, you see what I mean. So with it on, let me play. You can see that now with this on, the compressor is not acting because it was being triggered by the kick on the low frequencies. And when I pull those out, whereby there's a low cut, that means no compression is going on at the moment. So actually now I need to set these frequencies correctly to get an effect on the snare, whereby there's whenever the snare hits, we're getting some compression going on. So have a look at this. So you see we're getting some gain reduction, but it's just on the snare, not on the kick itself. So you get the idea, like this can be useful to cancel out some frequencies that you do not want to trigger the compressor. And it's useful on signals like this, either on overhead microphones or on any kind of bass signal, like any signal that has been grouped. Imagine drums have been grouped together, or like a whole bunch of keyboards have been grouped together, meaning that you no longer have a distinct channel that you're dealing with a bunch of channels. So this is a very useful element to have in this kind of setting. And now if I play this together with the rest of the drums, you'll see what kind of effect it has. Heavy, right? And if I add the bass in there, it's quite a contained rhythm track, and so you can see here how important this kind of compression is. There are two more controls on this compressor that I haven't talked about. I'll start with this mix, which basically you can use so that you balance between the sound that has been processed and the original sound that you had. So if you had it at say 50-50, you'll be saying that 50% of the signal is what was coming in originally, the uncompressed sound, and then 50% is what has been compressed. In a sense, it's kind of like what they call parallel compression. So within the compressor itself, you have parallel compression, whereby it has given you the sense of two different channels of the same signal. One channel being the original, and then another channel being of the processed sound, and then you balance them with this. In most cases, you'd want this to be at 100%. And then here with the input gain, this particular one, of course, as it says, it just allows you to raise that amount of signal coming in, because you may have, maybe your signal is quite low coming in, so you can raise it so that the compressor can deal with it. Or perhaps your signal is too loud, and then you use this diode here to take it down a bit so that it can be dealt with properly, because if it's too loud, then the compressor might end up acting too soon, or you can't set your threshold properly because the signals are already all too loud, so compressing them intelligently is hard. I'm going to wrap it up here. So let me just do a little bit of bass compression here to again show what compression can do now when you're dealing with like several instruments at once. So basically this is the whole mix. I'm going to really deal mainly with ratio, threshold, torque, release and makeup gain.
Omukwano gwo nze buli lwe ngunywa gulinga kakaawa akawo akanziza engulu coffee at last. It's like drinking love, yeah. Coffee at last. Mother, drinking with you. Whoa.
So just very subtle. You have to be very careful when you use bass compression. When you're kind of like compressing the whole mix, you have to do it very, very lightly. So that means, be careful of the threshold, which parts of the signal you're going to compress, and then also to keep the ratio really low. Don't like overcook, because if you push it the other way, you'll squash the mix and it will lose like flavor. All the dynamics within the music will be gone. And then on a bass mix, it's quite unwise to have a fast attack. Also, if you have a fast release, then it can cause a lot of like what they'll call like a pumping effect, which can be desirable in some dance music like EDM and that. But still, you have to experiment a lot to find what works for that particular piece of music. And that wraps up this session. In the next one, I'll talk about side chaining and parallel compression. My name is Kaz Kasozi. Thank you and take care now. Goodbye.